were being groomed to play the lead in this show that we were rehearsing for were stuck on the subway. And the director said, "Oh, you boy who never talks, just read the lines in the meantime." And I'd been watching them for several months, doing their lines, and I guess thinking of how I would do it instead. And so I went up there, did my thing, and at the end of doing this particular speech, she looked completely shocked, and I thought, oh dear, I knew it. That I've been so bad that I have made her dumbfounded. And a week later, we sat in a similar configuration as this, and she offered me the lead. And so the very first play I ever did was playing the lead at the Royal National Theatre at the age of 15. And it was called The Disposables. It was a play that had been written for the youth theatre at the National Theatre. And so, yeah, it was kind of an incredible start. People seemed to like the performance, and that's where I caught the bug.
Wonderful. So, like many performers here, you come from a theatre background, and you came to film from a theatre background. What do you think the relationship is between theatre and film? Do you think film actors, a theatre background is a good foundation?
I think to be the best at what I do, which is be a storyteller, I think there is no substitute personally for theatre. Every great actor of film that I admire and watch, they've all had that kind of start. And I think what theatre gives you that purely film can't is bravery. It is so terrifying, night after night, to go before an audience, whether it's an audience of 10 or an audience of 10,000, and tell the truth. Because what an audience in a setting like this does you, if I were to stand right there and do a piece of Shakespeare, or to do a Greek tragedy or a contemporary piece of theatre, I would know very quickly if I was telling the truth. You would be shuffling in your seats, someone would be checking their text, you know, you just know when the audience is with you. And when you have the opportunity night after night to hone your craft, to find out what it is that works for an audience, also what theatre gives you is roles that film often can't give you, certainly as a young actor. You know, when I was at drama school, I went to the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, and I played roles the equivalent of King Lear. I played David Copperfield. I played Puck. I played old people, young people, women, men, comedy, tragedy. I mean, I did the gamut, because that's what a theatre training does for you. It is trying to stretch you in every which way. I mean, when I started at drama school, in order to get girls, I had done a lot of weight training, and so I was one of those guys who walked around like that, you know. And I remember in my first year at drama school, a teacher saying to me, "You're gonna have to stop. You're gonna have to stop with the weights." And I said, "I don't think so." And she said, why would I have to stop? And she said, "You have to get back to zero. You have to be someone who can play a prince and a pauper. You have to be someone who can play a leader and a follower. And in order to do that, you have to start from zero. You have to start from neutral. So if you're playing a nerd and you walk in like that, it's not going to work." So very reluctantly, you know, we stretched out my muscles. We got me to the point where I was more neutral. And it meant that I could play Henry V, or I could also play someone who was a broken down, subjugated human being. And I didn't understand it until I felt that in my body. Film can't give you that. You know, you turn up, you have to be ready. You have to be, and you don't get cast as that. You know, one of the reasons why so many actors who are not American are doing well in America is because, for whatever reason, my generation of actors have been seduced into um, an abundance of importance being laid on how they look, as opposed to who they are, what they are, how they behave. So often, I know for a fact I get roles that I kind of shouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't cast me as Martin Luther King. I'm sorry. I just wouldn't. But if you've shown an aptitude for being able to go here, there, and everywhere, then it's a big thing for a director to trust you with a role like that. And the only way they can trust you with that, I think, is if they've seen you do things that transcend who you are already. Um, and that's what theatre gives you. I know for a fact that everything I did in Selma was forged. In being able to give those speeches, that was Shakespeare. Being able to show that level of vulnerability, that's an audience telling me every night that they believe it when I'm able to be quiet. So anyway, I do think that the best actors in the world often have started in theatre for a reason.
And now you spoke a bit about training at London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. And we have some students here who are students of music and drama in university, and a lot of people who've gone through that system to wherever they are and whatever they're doing right now. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what does work look like? So when you're stretching not only the physical muscles, but the mental and emotional muscles to tell the truth, what are you actually doing? Because in university, in school, in theatre conservatories, you do things like Alexander speak or Zoko or all of that. And then you'll leave, and then a lot of people will be like, I'm an actor now, this is what I do. So then you turn on the camera, and then I do. And there's, I think, sometimes a gap between what training and what sort of work looks like for a working actor.
Well, I think training is what gives you the jump start to what work is. It's like anything. My kids, for instance, they see their mum and dad being actors, and they say, oh, maybe I should be an actor. Categorically, I'm not going to allow them to do it unless they train. Because to me it's a craft. It is no different than being a surgeon, being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an astronaut. It is something I take incredibly seriously. I do think that film, theatre, storytelling has the power to shift, change, break down, build up culture. And so for me, it's not about celebrity, it's not about money, it's sacred to me. And so therefore, when you're given the opportunity, when people invite you into their subconscious, when they invite you into their hearts, you better have something to say, as far as I'm concerned. And so from that point of view, the training is what gives you the tools to hopefully touch magic. What we do is we are in pursuit of magic. I'm very blessed that within a 16-year career, I know what magic feels like. I've touched it, I've tasted it, but I also know that it is something that is not a given. You can have the best group of people, you can have great artists, circumstances, money, but the only thing I think that gives you a true chance at touching magic is training, talent, and humility. And I would take training over talent every day of the week. The reason I say that is I've directed theatre, and I've auditioned or worked with actors who have great talent, but they don't have work ethic. And so they plateau very quickly, and they rely on their talent. Someone who will work on themselves, work on the character, serve the text, serve the director, serve the other actors, you can take them anywhere. And the truth of the matter is, not only do they end up surprising the audience, but they end up surprising themselves. And once you've tasted that, it is something you are in perpetual pursuit of. Um, Ryan Gosling told me a story recently. Do you guys know who Ryan Gosling is? Just astounding young actor. And he did a film called The Believer, and it was one of his earliest films. And I saw him recently and said, that scene, I just don't even, where did that come from? And he said, on that particular day, he's a Jewish guy who plays a Nazi. And there's a scene in a cafe where he's talking to someone and he's espousing why he hates Jewish people so much. And it is an astounding piece of acting. And I said to him, how did you achieve that? He said, on the day that we were shooting that, I did the speech and the director said, stop. Cleared the set, said, what are you doing? This is so bad. What is something up with you? And he said, I'm so sorry. And the director said, look, I'm going to get the crew back in, and I really need, because time is money. We need to get this. He was so embarrassed, so mortified that the director felt that way, that when the crew came back, the sheer desire to get it right meant that he did that scene that I saw, and I still don't, something elemental happened. And he said to me, it's interesting you say that. He said, because I've been chasing that scene ever since. Something happened there that that feeling, that moment, and I feel like what happened is, because you can't pull that out of midair, if you just don't have the ability, but it was the combination of his talent, the work he had done on the character, and that moment that created magic. You cannot create magic without the raw material. And so, for me, if you don't, and training, by the way, doesn't just mean going to drama school. I mean, it means just putting in the work. It means being a student of humanity. Literally, I spend time watching people. I spend time watching movies. I spend time talking to directors. I spend time reading about acting, juxtaposing different performances, juxtaposing different styles of acting, because I need to know it. There's a saying, eat the chicken and spit out the bones. Imbibe as much as you can and use what you need. You will have 3 films if you are good looking and hot. You have 3 films before they move on, literally. Especially if you're a woman. So you better have something beyond your looks if you want to still be acting beyond the age of 35, because they're just not interested after your looks have faded, and that's just the truth. So to me, the training, which is just being a student of humanity, is the beginning, and work, in terms of your question, is you can't outwork me, is the truth of the matter. And I live by that because my ambition is to be the best actor I can possibly be within the tools God has given me. In order to do that in such a competitive industry, I literally have to be up while you are asleep. I literally have to read more than the other guy who's vying for that role. That's just what it has to be, and you can see it. I had a moment. This will be my last anecdote with regards to this, but I had an incredible 24 hours about 3 years ago, whereby I did a film called Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise. And before I had got Jack Reacher, I'd got this film called Lincoln, with Spielberg directing and Daniel Day-Lewis. And through a quirk of the schedule, I ended up shooting with Spielberg and Daniel Day-Lewis by day. Then Tom Cruise, who was like, where's David and why aren't we able to do the car chase, sent a jet to get me the minute I finished that scene, and I shot through the night with Christopher McQuarrie directing and Tom Cruise crashing into me several times. And in many ways, Daniel Day-Lewis and Tom Cruise couldn't be more different in terms of actors. In some ways, you have the actor's actor and the movie star's movie star. But the thing that both of them have that illustrates why they are who they are, why they've been doing it for as long as they have, is you can't outwork Tom Cruise. You just can't. I tried. I watched him pull 36-hour shifts regularly, going from first unit to second unit, back to first unit. Only once did I see him nod off during a scene, and it was one day he was lying down. So, you know, it was nice to know that he's human, but the same thing with Daniel Day-Lewis, acting opposite him, I've never experienced that with an actor. I mean, him as Lincoln was the actorly equivalent of a time machine. I mean, being around him was astounding to me. I mean, literally, I had one scene with him, and I got everything I needed in terms of how to play Dr. King from being with him for one scene. And it was the commitment. You cannot just turn up and be that without years of experience, diligent research, absolute commitment to staying in character the whole time. And what he did is he created an environment whereby every actor on that set literally fell in line with what was emanating from him. He was a leader. And it set the tone for what that film ultimately became. That also, to me, is what a leading man is. A leading man is not someone who's good looking and gets paid a certain amount. A leading man is someone who leads. Someone who takes this thing, puts it on their back and says, come hell or high water, we are going to succeed. And so those are the people who go on to do this as long as they're alive. And I think that combination of training and that kind of back-breaking work ethic is what gives you a long career.
Now you've said that in the world of theatre, you could play anyone easily.
I didn't say that.
Well,
not
I
easily.
heard my own things.
Not easily.
What I mean is, in the world of theatre, you can play a British monarch, or you can play, you can just play characters that historically were different races and ethnicities. It's a more flexible arena. And what, you know, sometimes people think or feel is that in the world of film or Hollywood in particular, there's a limit to the types of roles or stories that black actors in particular are maybe given to tell. I wondered if, when you've had experience on three continents, and I wondered if you had experienced any form of racism in the Hollywood world, and what those forms have taken, what that had looked like.
Yes, I mean, racism is very real, as is sexism, as is ageism within my industry. The primary form it takes, and you're right, I have lived on 3 continents and I've been a professional actor on 2, Europe and America. And the correlation, the commonality I should say, between the two is racism in my profession is born out of ignorance and arrogance and also a lie. That lie is that the world in which we live in is not ready for certain types of people to be seen en masse. So an example would be, I did a show called MI5, or Spooks, as it was called in the UK, and I did 3 seasons of it, and it was hugely successful. And at the end of the 3 years, my contract was up, and the lead guy had moved on, and effectively that role was that the leading male was vacant. I had effectively done a 3-year apprenticeship, you know, and if you watched that series, it's very clear that my character was being groomed to lead. And it came to that discussion, should I stay or should I go? And I had the discussion with the producers. And basically it became clear that not because they're bad people, not because they are racist, but because, to be brutally honest, they had bought into the lie that Great Britain wasn't ready for a black lead in such a high-profile show. They basically had a revolving door of white actors who fit that. I had another situation like that, whereby there was a lead role in a British show, and the head honcho of the channel said the audience isn't ready for that. Was what came back. I developed a period drama, which we do a lot of in the UK, and it was about bare knuckle boxing, and I took it again to a very prominent channel, group of producers, and they said to me that if it's not Jane Austen or Charles Dickens, the audience doesn't really know what we're giving them. If we literally, I have the email, I've kept it because I need to go and read it every now and again to remind me. So the audience really won't know what we're giving them if we give them this. That was the moment I knew I had to leave the UK. The same thing exists to a certain... In Great Britain, it's the class system. In America, the class system is rooted in money, which is much easier to deal with, to be perfectly honest. Class is something that is amorphous, nebulous, you can't really hold it. If I have money, yes. I know Oprah, so I know what that looks like. So, you know, what you have in America, which is why, to be honest, it's more fertile ground, is that I can go to America and a combination of my Nigerianness, which means I will not take no for an answer, and I know I'm a king. Combined with having had so many, combined with having so many times having my head bob against this glass ceiling in the UK, and then an industry in America, which I do think is meritocratic, is one whereby if you push hard enough, I mean, let's be real, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far as a black actor in America. All that says to me is I have to work 4 times as hard as Ryan Gosling. That's fine, because we talked about work. I can do that. You know, what I can't do is suddenly be an Oxbridge white dude with floppy hair who you're going to put in the next Jane Austen. I can't do that. So, a case in point is Selma. So, Selma is a film. Jess and I moved to America in May 2007. June of 2007, the script for Selma hit my doorman. I read it, and I felt God tell me I would play Martin Luther King in that film, which is completely ridiculous. I had done no American movies. Why on earth would I get to play this guy? But there was a knowing about it that just wouldn't leave me. So the first director who was on it, Stephen Frears, I auditioned for him, and the note that came back to my agent is, he is not king. You really don't want to say that to me. You just don't, you know, if I feel like there is something for me to take, and it is mine, and I know that I will put in the work, that's just red rag to a bull. So, he's not king. 3 years later, the project came around again. Paul Haggis had come and gone as a director, as had Spike Lee. Lee Daniels came along after Precious and was auditioning actors for this. the work kicked in. I auditioned for him. Incredible actors who I adore were vying for the same role. But to cut a fairly long story short, I ended up getting the role. There is a reason why Lee was the 6th director in that film, and it hadn't got made yet. Dr. King is the only American in the 20th century to have a holiday named after him. Why there is a J. Edgar Hoover movie before there's a Dr. King movie, I can't articulate for you. Why there is a Jimmy Hoffa movie before there's a Dr. King movie doesn't make sense to me. But this film just didn't want to get made. If you really break down why it took so long, ultimately I do think it's because the people in positions of power, we all want to see ourselves in movies. And so if the people in power are all white, older men, what you see in movies are younger, better looking versions of them in movies. That's what you have perpetually, and their fantasies of what women should be in movies as well. It's why you need different people advocating, greenlighting, curating, and creating what gets put out into the world. So, with Lee Daniels, even after 4 Oscar nominations for his film and everything, we still couldn't get that film made. I did the Butler with Lee, I did the Paperboy with Lee, he moved on for the project. I knew this film had to happen before I died, and I knew I was called to do it. So, I phoned up Pathé one day, it was close to Christmas. I said to Cameron McCracken, who is the head of Pathé, I said, Cameron, should I eat more turkey than I otherwise would this Christmas? What are we doing? Are we making this film? He said, well, we know we want to make it with an African-American director, and we know they have to be someone who can handle a budget of $20 million. Who is that person? They basically burned through everyone who they deemed worthy of that, and they're 3 guys, basically. Spike Lee was one, he had come and gone. Lee Daniels was one, he had come and gone. So maybe it's just 2 guys. I had done this film with Ava DuVernay, a small film, $200,000 movie called Middle of Nowhere. And I saw in her the kind of talent that comes along once in a generation, easily. So I called Katwe and I said, I know who should direct this film. It's this lady, Ava DuVernay. What does she direct? Well, we did this film called Middle of Nowhere, for which she's just won Best Director at Sundance. Oh wow, what was the budget? $200,000. Oh, no way, no way. There's no way she can direct this film. I was like, why? Because, you know, we need someone who's tried and tested. So I just had to go back to him and say, okay, you just had Tom Hooper direct The King's Speech for you. What did he do before The King's Speech? Oh, well. No. Let's talk about this. They're not evil people. You just react to what you know. If Tom Hooper comes into a room and looks like me, sounds like me, I feel like there is a commonality there, we have a more convivial conversation than we otherwise would, than if a black lady with dreadlocks who's from Compton walks into the room and goes, I'm the one to direct your movie. It's just what we do as human beings. So I had to pummel away at them until they conceded. I did play the race card a little bit. That's fine. Use all the tools. And you know, she rewrote the script and we were nudging ever closer. It was going the way of the way it did with Lee Daniels. I had shared with Oprah Winfrey the desire I had to play Dr. King while we were doing Butler. And she had said to me, I believe in you and I believe in that. I will do anything and everything I can for you to help that happen. When this sort of started feeling like it was going south, I made the call. I said, Momo, I need you. And she said, to do what? I said, I think I need to be a producer. So what does that mean? I just feel like you plus this project means it'll happen. And that's exactly what happened. The reason I tell you that story is to go back to what Maisha stands for. If we don't tell our stories, no one else will. If Oprah Winfrey, see, if Oprah Winfrey didn't exist, if Ava didn't exist as someone who said to them, I know every director that has come to you thus far has basically stumbled over the budget because you will only make this film for a certain number because it's a black film. Black doesn't travel. We're not really sure if black people want to see all that pain again, so therefore it has to be this tiny number compared to what it would be if it was, say, a movie about JFK. So these directors were all going in, doing their due diligence with the budget, saying, this is what this is going to cost, guys. And every time they wanted to make it for 20% less than what it should be. You had a woman who came along and went, give me a number, I will back into it. Just give me a number. So they ran out of excuses not to make the movie. Then they had the most powerful black woman in media come along and say, I'll be a producer, I'll advocate for this, I believe in David. Okay, so David isn't a name, Ava isn't a name, well, a couple people know who I am. And that is literally why that film happened.
Sorry.
That isn't possible in the UK. There isn't an Oprah Winfrey. They don't even acknowledge our equivalence of Dr. King in the UK. And so, the point of all of that is that racism is real, as in the reason why there hasn't been a Dr. King film almost 50 years after his death is rooted in the fact that he's a black hero as opposed to a white hero. It's just simple as that. You know, we love seeing heroes in movies. There is a reason why. You know, even with the Academy Award, like when we play heroes, it's just not the same love as when we play what feeds into their worldview. And when I say they, I don't just mean like just this white monolith. I mean the ruling class. So what Maisha represents to me is a phenomenal opportunity, because the next powerhouse in terms of the entertainment industry in the world is Africa. There's no question. If we were to figure out piracy, if we were to figure out this thing of production value and not relying upon without, but rely from within, this thing will get done, for sure. And because I've seen the power of advocacy, that's what happened in Selma. I know that that's what's happening here in embryonic form, and I know that that's what's going to get us there.
You know, when you say production value, I mean, we're Nigerian. We in Uganda are huge consumers of Nollywood. Piracy and all things aside, I'm wondering what you're taking. I mean, when you say you need to get there in terms of production value, yes, there is a bit of a cultural appetite for things that aren't valued the same way, perhaps in the UK or in the US. I mean, what do you mean there? Where do we need to go?
This is what I call the chitlins syndrome. Chitlins is the guts of the animal. And the reason why it became an African-American delicacy is because it's all they had, was the leftovers. So you got to make the most of what you're given. It's why I hate the N-word. I hate that word to the core of my being, and it's the same thing as chitlins. The reason why I believe African Americans have embraced that word and use it to describe each other is because when you are subjected to heinous abuse, the only way to live with yourself is to own it, is to make it your own. because it's all you're given. So, okay, this is what you're giving me. I'm going to own it, make it mine, don't touch it. At least give me that. So, I think in terms of our industry here, I'm from a royal family in Nigeria. I know for a fact that when I'm around my highly self-important uncles, they everything they are doing is not like this in life. But yet, when I watch a movie in Nollywood, hey, what are you? So if your industry is so small and you have to make these films in such a lick because of piracy, and you have only 3 stories that you regurgitate time and again. You all watch too many novels. Yeah. See, this conversation wouldn't work in America. Everyone would be like, but you know that's what it is. You know, there is such a desire for it. There's such a dearth of it, of our own stories, that we consume this because it's what we have. But it's not the entirety of who we are. It just isn't. You know, I've been all over this continent. It is infinitely rich in its geography and its topography and its people and the stories. And yes, we've had so many bad things happen to us, but there's so much joy on this continent. You know, when you see films in America, that's why I signed on to Queen of Katwe within 10 minutes of reading that script. I knew I had to do this movie. Is because what we're doing with this film is, I have no frame of reference for it, really. You know, the joy, despite the poverty, despite what is a very real circumstance here, of the need to dig yourself out of a hole, and that Fiona did that and is doing that, and Robert Katende is enabling that. As indigenous Africans, you just don't see that. The Last King of Scotland, which was the last film I did here, on paper, that film was James McAvoy's movie. You know, Forrest Whitaker's role was a supporting role. Categorically, if you read the script, there's no way you would say he would win for Best Actor. What happened is he was so catastrophically good in that role that in the edit, it shifted. That's what we always have to do. It's what we're always having to do. You know, The Help, which I was also in, that's Emma Stone's movie. But Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer ripped that thing to shreds. And so, there's a shift in the perception of what that film actually was set up to be. I can't watch Blood Diamond, personally. I can't watch it, but I'm sorry if anyone here produced it. But that's German Honsu's story. There's no way Leonardo DiCaprio is putting a finger on German. He will snap him like a twig. He somehow is able to pull and push this guy around in his own country. No. I just, you know, so the other day we were shooting on our film, and Lupita was sat selling her wares in Gaba Market, and the camera tracked, and there were 2 women beside her who literally do what, you know, sell at that market or are from here, clearly authentic, boom. That camera's tracking, buy it, it's on Lupita, buy it, keep going. And what struck me was it is the first time I have ever seen, especially done by any kind of studio, someone who looks like her, is her, and is a movie star. And the beauty of it was so I was watching it kind of going, why is this so rare? Look how beautiful it is. Look how astounding it is. Look how beautiful she is. And she looks like she's from here, and yet she is a movie star. The world has embraced her. Why is she such an anomaly? Why is this such an anomaly? And the truth of the matter is, if Mira hadn't been here for the last 25 years, if she didn't have the love for this country and wasn't as excellent of a director as she is, this wouldn't happen. So thank you very much. So she is the, don't tell anyone, I'm very butch actually. This is all that acting we've been talking about. But she is the Oprah Winfrey on this.
Love the money.
The money is coming, my sister. The money is coming. But you know, she's the advocate, and because of the excellence, it's undeniable. So Disney has nowhere to go. You know, when it's like, oh, okay, we love this story, but who's going to direct it? Mira and I are going to direct it. Oh, okay, we love this story, but who's gonna play this woman in it? We need to have some kind of, well, she just won an Oscar. Is that okay? Will that do it? You know, so they basically ran out of excuses not to make, and that's because we're building something. But if she hadn't come here and gone on to be otherworldly brilliant in 12 Years a Slave, it just wouldn't be happening, because they have the excuses to say they're not ready yet. The audience isn't ready yet, which is what I heard 10 years ago. But you can't say that, because they've kind of shown you that they are. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I believe in everything I just said.
Yeah. I think the last question before I open it up to people in the audience that I have for you is, so you're going on to do another African film project, and I wondered what sort of guides you or drives you to choose the films and tell the stories that you do, and how you come to that.
I don't have the luxury of just doing whatever I want whenever I want, because I know that what I do matters. I know that this film matters. I know that Selma matters. I know that as much as I would probably just like to go off and do a trivial, silly action movie, I know that the opportunities I've been given, basically we are at a stage, I believe, whereby if you're a boxer and you're in the ring and you have your opponent on the ropes, the one thing you can't afford to do is retreat to your corner. You have to wail on that opponent until they go down. And so, for whatever reason, for a time, I'm being given opportunities, I have a notoriety that means that I can be the change that I want to see. And so, I have to do it. You know, I want the world that my children inhabit to be different than this. I don't want that image of Lupita to be the first time I've seen that. You know, I want that to be the norm, because it is the norm here, and being transcendent and not just broken down and browbeaten as a people. That's not the entirety of who we are. And so I am dedicated to seeing films made that fly in the face of these stereotypes that keep us bound culturally, because I do know that I've seen the effect that Selma has had on people. Seeing the power of solidarity, seeing the power of peaceful protest, seeing the power of not just black people, but black and white people coming together for a common goal, common cause. Seeing the power of a black woman directing Selma and the effect that has on women, not just black women, just going, oh my goodness. And her being someone who can not just direct brilliantly, but speak about it. You know, it has an effect. So, you know, I happily put on my back the fact that I just have to be part of that change. You know, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem.
Thank you. So now we'll open it up if there's anyone in the audience who has a question. Charles?
10 years ago, they brought you in and took you out. So we could have had maybe something that's inspiring 10 years ago. We didn't. Mira, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to bow before you, not because you're a Nigerian chief. I'm going to bow before you for the tears. Thank you for crying for this continent.